Every horoscope begins with a time. Every rectification begins with its absence. Amberlynn Reid is known for many things, from weight loss journeys that ended in gaining weight, to dramatic controversies, and finally to, well, her. Amber is a surprisingly interesting, uninteresting person. Though she does some of the most mundane and ridiculous content, we've somehow grown fascinated with this girl. While almost everything about her life is known, there are a few things we don't know. Things such as, where's Rarity? Have you reached 600 pounds? Will you even consider the advice in this chart? Are all things we ask ourselves. In regards to Amberlynn, we know all about sink corners and washcloths, but one thing I couldn't find was the time of her birth. Well, I tried my best to ask via touching the poo. I even joined the Discord, and the content was so abhorrent I left within 5 minutes of asking my ignored question. More important gross things were being discussed, I guess. I unluckily didn't get any response, which was actually very lucky. That being said, I'm a newbie astrologer. Things like palmistry and tarot are more my thing, but I decided to try a technique called birth time rectification. Birth time rectification is more or less the technique astrologers use to find someone's exact time of birth. Important dates often correspond to planetary movements. And yes, Amber, the planets, sun, and moon all really exist and move around us. Events like marriages, graduations, births, deaths, and yogurt tragedies are all important things that we use to calculate the time of birth. By working backwards, we can swap the planets and see how their placements during those events were influencing the vibrations of that day. The task is to fill in the pieces of the puzzle that are missing, not to create a chart, but to reconstruct one. While things like birthday, month, and year are all usually a given, that does most of the work for us. However, smaller movements like the ascendant house, which moves every 2 hours or so, are harder to figure out because of the time of the birth is missing. And even tiny insignificant changes are important. Butterfly effect and all that. Our mission here is not to tear anyone up or down, but to point out the patterns in spiritual practices with the effort to improve my skills as an astrologer and kinda as a fun little look into the girl that's captivated our attention. I was immersed in girl world since 2018. I've been a longtime resident in this section of the internet. Hours, days, years of entertainment watching Amber do silly things. The fact that we know the dates of certain things, yes, I know she pre-films and all that, but I'm going to trust her for now. Because our subject is well documented, videos of relationships, health disclosures, controversies, milestones, emotional breakdowns, emotional routines, and audience interactions have created a big behavioral evidence that we can use to match up to these placements. One working hypothesis places Amber's birth time around 7:38 a.m. in Key West, Florida, producing a Sagittarius ascendant. This chart serves as the foundation for the analysis that follows. Astrology is not fake. It's not creative writing. It's pattern recognitions, not choosy. Astrologers don't sit down for hours deciding which planets have which traits. That honor goes to a higher power. The distinction is critical for everyone to understand. This is a hypothesis. I'm creating a hypothetical chart based on a time that I think matched up best. This is not evidence of anything, and whoever says this is all true is telling lies. Without actually knowing or having a second party approximation, Aunt Tammy, if you hear this, please get the birth chart. Just kidding. Unless. Many people can read a description of a daily horoscope and see something like, you will be faced with many challenges today, but really we're faced with challenges every day, so it's vague and fits for most people. That's kind of how astrology keeps people engaged. But when you actually calculate from the specific time of your first breath, it creates a snapshot of the universe in its formation. People from ancient times have always considered the stars very deeply. They assigned stories and traits from their mythology to the planets, constellations, and galaxies. Many people know the horoscope signs from the West, based on Jungian and Greek mythology. The West or tropical zodiac is determined based on the planet's position in reference to the Earth's seasons. It always begins the zodiac at 0 degrees Aries, or the spring equinox. This means Aries will always start when spring begins in the northern hemisphere. This is called the tropical zodiac. I, however, like the system of Parashari Yotish using Lahiri Ayanamsa and the Vimshottari Dasha system. The main difference is the reference point. Earth and space has drifted over time, so it's long since drifted away from the traditional reference point. This creates a difference of about 24 degrees. Many people will go through the stages of grief when their sign changes from Aries to a Pisces, mostly throwing it out the door to pretend to be upset about it, until they realize this creates an opportunity to prove my point. When a chart predicts personality, it's easy to find similarities. But when personality and timing align, that's when it becomes a fun little project to promote my services as an astrologer and leave my stain on the sink. I mean, on Girl World. What's the difference? We've both been up Amberlynn's ass for too long. The important dates I've considered in my first iteration of this chart, dates such as her first upload, channel creation, moves, breakups, proposals, career milestones, illnesses, shrimp-related controversies, and a national tragedy turned into a story about yogurt. All of these fed into the narrative of the planets. The first clue, despite being the queen of Girl World, the first thing that came up wasn't about her fame. It was about embodiment. Over and over, we see a similar pattern repeating: food, comfort, consumption, weight, illness, surgery, bodily visibility, and physical existence. This is highly unusual because most public figures are known for art, politics, business, athletics, and intellectual achievements. In Amber's case, the body itself repeatedly becomes the stage for her karmatic destiny to play out. This observation surprisingly helped immensely. Certain ascendants naturally orient life towards embodiment more strongly than others. Taurus is one of them. Sagittarius, the working hypothesis. Just kidding. After further examination and a different time, I've changed my hypothesis already. After about 15 pages, I recalculated and must start again. Now I believe her ascendant is a Sagittarius, which really sucks because it's harder to spell. Sagittarius in this placement brings a different energy than Taurus. I believed it was Taurus because of the embodiment and food symbolism. A lot fit, but a lot didn't. A good astrologer can make a convincing chart for anyone, but a real chart must be verified by actual documented times. With Sagittarius in the ascendant, it brings more attention to storytelling, public life, narration, and identity becoming content. This is more Sagittarian than the Taurus hypothesis. Sagittarius is the sign of meaning. Most signs seek something. Taurus seeks stability, Cancer seeks belonging, Scorpio transformation, and Sagittarius seeks meaning. This is one of the most misunderstood signs in astrology, an idea that they probably secretly love. Popular astrology describes them as adventurous, philosophical, and freedom-loving, but they all emerge from a deeper impulse: the need to know meaning. Sagittarius is the archer. He aims true and points to the horizon, something far away and distant, something not yet understood. And that's where Sagittarius finds meaning, in the weight loss journey, in life's journey. This placement caught my attention because of the public record. Her chart was still strong with the Taurus ascendant, but when I tested the Sagittarius ascendant, things shifted so hecticana that I had to take a closer look. This placement creates a life story, or rather, her life is a story. Her life is easily divided into chapters or eras: Octavia, Weight Watchers, Mustard and Cottage Cheese, Crystal Destiny, Beck, Wifey, Salami Linguini. We're not watching separate events. We're watching a narrative. Sagittarius interprets existence into a story. Experiences become life lessons, lessons become wisdom, wisdom becomes something worth sharing. The ascendant falls in the Purva Ashada Nakshatra. Purva Ashada Nakshatra. Her constellation in the Vedic tradition. It's the former invincible one. It represents the cosmic water slowly moving, but over centuries it can carve mountains. Strength through persistence, victory through endurance, transformation from continuation. Persistence. Amberlynn Reid is like a cockroach. She won't give up easily, especially if you leave food out. She has persistence. Not merely success or efficiency, persistence. The story continues, the channel, or her attempts at maintaining a public life, continue. Through new challenges and new relationships, her audience remains. Persistent Lynn Reid. The shadow of this nakshatra, every gift contains a challenge. Purva Ashada's challenge is release. The same persistence that creates resilience can also create attachment. She wants everything to persist with her. This is why she can't let go of things or people. However, the most striking feature of this chart is the stellium next to it. Within Sagittarius, we find the Sun, Venus, Uranus, and Mercury in retrograde in a cluster often called a stellium, a concentration of planetary energy. This creates a constant pull from these planets all at once. First house becomes loud, then all the others. Her first house, which represents identity, is the most important thing. Her identity becomes central to her existence. The main mission of this chart is not watch me create, it's going to be watch me. Sun in Sagittarius. Mula Nakshatra and the search for truth. The queen enters the story. The first planet, heavenly body that we're going to examine is the sun. In every astrological tradition, the sun is important. It's the center from which all other aspects gravitate. While we look at the whole universe, it may seem insignificant, but the sun represents identity, purpose, vitality, selfhood, will, and consciousness. With the sun being in the first house, we run into something interesting. The first house is the face we show to the world, our presence, body, and experiences. When the sun occupies this position, the native loves to be the center of attention, whether intentionally or unintentionally, attention finds them. Visibility is not fame. While the sun in the first house is usually a placement of fame, it doesn't always guarantee it's for the right reason. Visibility can make people famous, but it's the action and intention behind it which determines the nature of that fame. Notoriety is also a form of fame. The basic idea is people notice. Sagittarius Sun, the philosopher. The sun in this hypothetical chart is placed in Sagittarius. This creates a person who wants to learn from experience rather than theory. One of the defining traits of Sagittarius is experimental learning. Knowledge is only ever gained from direct participation rather than observation or reading. Because of this, life becomes a classroom. Mistakes are the teachers, successes are the teachers, relationships are the teachers, and breakups are the teachers. Everything becomes material for understanding. The native often struggles to view life as isolated events, but instead everything is connected to a larger story. Life is divided into chapters, eras, gates. Everything is like a chaotic journey of massive proportions. While I believe the Taurus hypothesis from earlier was a bit more accurate in this house, the overall chart, and specifically the nakshatra, which is in the constellation Mula is the constellation of the root. Sagittarius provides the language, Mula provides the soul, and Mula is often associated with destruction, uprooting, and dissolution. The symbol of Mula is a bunch of roots. Most people stop to smell the flowers, not even realizing that their source is deeper, more meaningful. Mula seeks the source of the situation type deal, rather than the outside appearance. The solar obsession. A sun in Mula creates an unconscious obsession with the truth. Not the objective truth, but personal truth. They avoid confronting things that are easier to ignore rather than facing it head on and genuinely learning from it. In public life, Mula appears as a repeated cycle of exposure. Hidden things become visible, assumptions collapse, narratives change, and the audience learns something new. Then another layer emerges, and another, and another, and another, like a pig seeking truffles. They keep digging. Another trait of Mula is the inability to let go of things. They dig and try to get to the bottom of a situation that has an easy solution they would rather ignore. The crisis teacher. One reason why Mula is associated with upheaval is because of crisis. During major turning points, people discover what actually matters. The unnecessary falls away, rarity, and the essentials remain. Amber versus subject matter. Combined with the first house placement, Mula creates an interesting dynamic. Instead of seeking the answers to the world, they seek answers about something more important, themselves. Life is a case study, experience the data, and the self becomes material for reflection and obsession. This chart naturally leads to autobiographical storytelling. Sun conjunct Mercury. The sun does not stand alone. Mercury is nearby. Mercury is known as the storyteller, the analysis, the translator of experiences. Conjunction becomes one of the strongest themes in this chart. Identity becomes narration. The native will only understand themselves by talking about themselves. Sometimes by journaling, sometimes by vlogging, always by external experience. Sun conjunct Venus. Identity meets connection as Venus is also close to the Sun and Mercury in the first house. This makes relationships become one with self concept. The people closest to the native become important characters within the story of identity. Relationships are not always based on dependence, but rather a key part of emotional understanding for the native. Mercury retrograde in the first house. Mercury governs speech, communication, thought, analysis, and storytelling. Retrograde Mercury often produces loops. Thought loops, narrative loops. The mind revisits familiar territory repeatedly. It can create amazing introspection or repetition. One of the most striking features in the public record is the recurring nature of many discussions. Topics, stories, plans, and explanations all return. One of the most striking features in the public record is the reoccurring nature of many discussions. Topics, stories, plans, and explanations all return. The same narrative structure appears again and again. This is why a retrograde Mercury perfectly fits this chart. Mercury in this chart matters a lot because Mercury is, in Sagittarius in the first house, near the ascendant beside the Sun and beside Venus. This makes the mind more visible. Thoughts become public. The process of thinking becomes part of the identity. Living out loud. Some people think privately. Others, like Amberlynn, think out loud. She processes her life through communication. An event occurs, then comes the explanation, the analysis, the reflection, and then the interpretation based on how she feels. The event and her need to tell her story become inseparable. The public diary. One of Mercury's most obvious manifestations is documentation. The individual develops a habit of recording experiences, not because they seek attention, but because the explanation itself feels necessary for them to organize into something understandable. Sagittarius Mercury. In this placement, Mercury becomes more interested in the big picture. They tend to ignore facts and details to make the story fit with their understanding of the situation. Her timeline can explain this a little. While we're watching, we name the eras after the relationship. Destiny, Beck, Wifey, etc. All of these are obvious chapters in writing a larger story, but hopefully not too large. Mercury in retrograde. Ever hear one of us mystical types say something about Mercury being in retrograde? This is basically a phenomena where the planets, due to some gravitational thing, I don't know, I study patterns, not astrophysics, the planet slowly moves backwards for a time, often debilitating the effect on the native. Amberlynn was possibly born during a Mercury retrograde event. A regular Mercury might think, this is my truth, while a retrograde Mercury would think something like, why is that my truth? And then they repeat the question over and over. Why topics return? Mercury retrograde creates another funny little quirk. It causes the mind to revisit unsolved material. Certain subjects refuse to disappear, explanations evolve, and stories and conclusions are edited. This placement revisits unsolved material and is constantly updating their own narrative. This doesn't inherently make someone a liar, but it also doesn't make them a truther. This is because understanding changes over time. The mind continues editing to understand, and through that, refinement, ideas, and events are all reimagined. Mercury retrograde also refuses to stop analyzing. They become trapped in their explanations. They may try to solve problems through thought alone. Mercury conjunct the Sun. When Mercury travels close to the Sun, their functions begin merging. Identity and communication become intertwined, and the native becomes known through their words. Speech becomes part of selfhood, and the story becomes the self. The conjunction often creates individuals who feel compelled to explain themselves. Not necessarily because they owe someone an explanation, but because Mercury wants the pieces to fit together. She becomes both the protagonist and the narrator to her story. The protagonist and the narrator to her life. Mercury also governs exchange. Conversation, dialogue, feedback are all significant parts of public life. The audience does not merely receive information, but they become part of the conversation. Every response creates new material, new interpretations, explanations, and cycles. Due to the Sagittarian nature of this placement in combination with the Sun, Mercury will produce a native that does not live through events. They try to understand them. Again and again, a persistent belief that she can understand the situation, she can understand herself. Venus in Sagittarius. The Sun asks, who am I? Mercury asks, what does this mean? Venus asks, who do I share this journey with? While Venus is mainly known to represent love, affection, and attraction, a better explanation is that Venus describes what the soul cherishes, what it values and will strive towards. Venus in the first house. This is one of the most personal placements for Venus. Venus doesn't remain hidden, it becomes part of the identity itself. The heart is worn openly, relationships are rarely compartmentalized, and they become woven into the story of selfhood. Relationships become eras, whereas most experience them as chapters. A relationship does not simply exist alongside life, it becomes life. The emotional atmosphere shifts along with daily routines and identity. The native changes with every lover. Love is an adventure. Venus adopts the personality of the sign it inhabits. In Sagittarius, it becomes an explorer. Growth, discovery, movement, and endless possibilities could all be on the horizon, and she always wears the wrong shoes. She does not just want companionship, she demands a journey and an explanation. She wants to change something. Amberlynn could be said to be an optimist, most of the time. She believes improvement is possible, or at least she did before she started dating a disgusting feeder. She still continues to believe. She still continues to believe that relationships can evolve, that she can lose weight, and that the story will continue. This blesses her with a hope that things will continue, but also prevents her from seeking endings. She will always think that things might improve tomorrow. Difficulty letting go. This position creates no problems with starting relationships, but struggles immensely with ending them, because the heart continues dreaming of possibilities long after reality begins to change. The future and dream remain vivid, the emotional investment remains significant, but the situation has changed. Purva Shada Venus. Venus occupies the same nakshatra as the ascendant. Like water against stone, it seems gentle, but slowly wears down mountains. The persistence persists. For this placement, relationships rarely remain superficial. Even short relationships can leave dainty footprints. Venus invests deeply. The heart commits to experience. The relationships are meaningful. Mercury occupies the same stage, making the lover and the storyteller the same. Relationships become stories. This gorl wants to completely understand their partner and relationship. Every action becomes a question which they'll scrutinize until they find answers. Venus is also with the sun. This means that relationships become her identity. The people closest to the native influence the way the native sees themselves. Partners become mirrors, not necessarily in a parasitic sense, but in an effort of the soul to change via transformation. A transformation that can only be found through relationships. When all these planets, and the sun, occupy the first house, relationships become visible. The audience sees them regardless of their desire to be seen. Ultimately, she needs a partner to show her who she wants to be. The biggest lesson she has to learn: the difference between hope and endless possibilities, or over-attachment in situations that no longer serve your spiritual growth. She is extraordinarily loyal, optimistic, and devoted, but the shadow of that is endless persistence becomes stubborn resistance. She needs to learn to understand when the story has reached its ending and it's time to let go. Moon and Aries in the 12th house. This position makes Amber prone to emotional isolation. It can be seen in instances of seeming disconnection between heart and mind. She struggles with emotional impulsiveness, being over-emotional unconsciously, having difficulty self-regulating her emotions, and a hidden emotional volatility. She may outwardly appear emotional, but there's a gap between felt emotion and portrayed emotions. Her reactions seem delayed, her emotional processing appears indirect, and her emotional awareness fluctuates. Usually depending on her own mood at the time, she lives emotionally in her own subconscious loops. Mars retrograde in Gemini in the second house. This is another huge placement. Second house rules speech, consumption, self-worth, eating, and food. With Mars in this placement, we see conflicts around food, compulsive consumption, argumentative speech, and impulsive eating patterns. Retrograde intensifies these behaviors. A good example of a time we can see this in action is the 9/11 yogurt incident. Mars in the second creates emotionally charged food memories, conflict through nourishment, and eating-related emotional imprinting. Because of all the events on 9/11, the most harrowing was in regards to strawberry yogurt. Jupiter and Ketu in the 4th house. 4th house represents emotional roots, home, childhood, security, and emotional foundations. With Ketu in this placement, Amberlynn feels emotionally detached from early home life. She fears instability, and she has a karmic disconnection from her roots. and she feels like no one sees her emotional needs. With Jupiter also joining Ketu, we get a distorted emotional wisdom, idealization, and disillusionment cycles, and seeking emotional meaning through comfort. Her unstable childhood, foster care, and emotional searching for more than her domestic life fits this placement very strongly. Saturn in retrograde Aquarius in the 10th house. 10th house is, in short, career and public life. Oddly enough, Saturn in this placement often creates an internet-based career, long-term public scrutiny, slow-building fame, karmic audience engagement, and life becoming a public burden. The retrograde aspect deepens this to repetitive public cycles, inability to escape the public eye, and stalled evolution. Her slow burn YouTube fame, long years of audience fixation, repetitive discourse, public stagnation, and her online saga creates a scarily accurate placement. Pluto in the 7th house. While Pluto isn't usually looked at in the traditional readings, I thought I'd add it because it's a little spot on. Pluto creates obsession. In the 7th house, it creates obsession with relationships. All-consuming emotions, power struggles, obsessive attachment cycles, transformative breakups, and identity found through partnership. This explains why she wants to be in someone else's skin, and why her personality changes based on who she's dating, and why it's so hard to know where her partner is all the time. This is purely speculative, because her birth time is unknown. But I find these to be a little fun, so here we go. A dasha is a time ruled by a planet that causes the climate of that period to shift in regards to symbolism of the planet. Let's take a peek. 1990 to 1997, Ketu Mahadasha. Unstable childhood, emotional fragmentation, rootlessness, foster home themes, disconnection from emotional security. 1997 to 2017, Venus Mahadasha. 1997 to 2005, emotional identity forms, attachment coping patterns, and increase in comfort seeking. 2005 to 2011, relationships become central, emotional dependency patterns develop, and online self-expression emerges. 2011 to 2013, internet, audience creation, communication, narration, and self-documentation. 2014 to 2016, cohabitation, relationship identity fusion, domestic-centered existence. 2017 to 2023, Sun Mahadasha. 2018 to 2019, spectacle, notoriety, visibility, public focus. 2020 to 2022, body becomes publicly central and karmically confronted. 2023 to 2033, Moon Mahadasha. Emotional overwhelm, isolation, subconscious processing, and psychological retreat. 2023 to 2026, emotional exhaustion, relationship discussions, withdrawal periods, and a mental health focus. 2033 to 2040, Mars Mahadasha. Food, speech, conflict, self-worth, intensified conflict, communication controversies, health and body confrontation, and aggressive reinvention attempts. 2040 to 2058, Rahu Mahadasha. Spectacle, obsession, internet mythology, distorted reality, public fascination, and renewed virality. 2050 to 2074, Jupiter Mahadasha. Philosophical reflection, wisdom attempts, narrative, reframing, a public reinterpretation. 2017 to 2093, Saturn Mahadasha. Isolation, legacy, accountability, endurance, and a crystallization of public memory. With all this said, this is the end of my deep dive to the bottom of the puddle. Hopefully I don't catch cellulitis. While I'm not the biggest fan of Amber as a person, I can sympathize somewhat after reading her chart. However, the chart is a map, but she walks or rides a scooter in whatever direction she wants. While certain things in her life have led to her being somewhat disadvantaged, the overall theme is closer to I've put myself in this situation and I believe it's going to change because I want it to, rather than facing the actual gravity of the situation. This whole chart is built on a hypothesis, but it's kinda on the nose in some parts. If this is even a little correct, which some of it is because we do have her birthday and year, then I hope with all honesty that she can see herself in this chart and maybe get a reality check. I don't really think it'll happen, but I also can't see into the future. Astrology is pattern recognition, not future premonition. That's all for me. Bye-bye.